Today our discussion is focused on history of psychology. That is, how psychology as a discipline developed and evolved. What were the beginnings? Today we know psychology as the study of affective, cognitive and behavioral aspects of human behavior. But it was how it began. What were the beginnings? Today we know that affective life, how psychology is a study of affective life, that is the study of feelings, how it is studied behaviors, and how it studies our cognitive processes, memory, thinking and learning, and the interaction of all these. But psychology started with a discipline. We know that not all disciplines start with the beginning, not every discipline has a date, but psychology started with a date, an year, and we all know that it was 1879 with the establishment of psychology laboratory at the University of Leipzig with Professor Wilhelm Wundt's work, that psychology was called as a discipline in itself. But why should we know past of psychology? What was the history of psychology? What is the use of knowing the history of psychology? First, we should know theoretical developments. What were the theories that evolved? What were the main ideas of psychological theories, and what are the applied strategies that are used in psychology for various applications? These things are essential to know to be an effective psychologist. Before we begin, there is one question that we would like to ask our viewers, that is, you will come to know about it. We all know about Charles Darwin and his work on theories of evolution, but how work of Darwin affected theories of psychology? Which theory of psychology was directly the result of Darwin's work on theory of evolution? As you watch, you will come to know about the effect of Darwin on psychology. How do we approach history of psychology? There are various methods to approach the history. History is to know about the past. We can know about the past in a chronological manner, from past to present. But in what ways? First is, we should know about the schools of psychology. What are these schools? And second is, study the history of psychology through the contribution of thinkers. What different thinkers have contributed to the development of psychology. And third is, we can also approach study of history of psychology through specific topics like learning, personality. What were the beginnings of theories in personality, how these were applied, how people take knowledge from different disciplines to establish different areas and to contribute to human behavior in a very positive manner. When we start with the history of psychology, we say that psychology has a long past but a short history. How is it so? Psychology as a history of psychology, as we all know, started in 1879. Wilhelm Wundt's work in the laboratory at the University of Leipzig. But what is the past of psychology that we say is long? Past of psychology begin with the questions of human existence, the existence of communities. When humans started to live in communities, they started to ponder on questions like, there are very basic questions on our existence, like who am I, the need to know ourselves, and what is the purpose of my life. Yes, psychology has a beginning on this question, like what is the meaning of my life, what is the purpose of my life, and what is good, what is bad, why should I live in a community or a group. All these questions, when human beings started thinking about these questions, psychology was finding its ground, and these questions were answered in various ways, like personal reflection, religions, rational philosophies and sciences. And the methods that knowing these various systems follow were, first is faith, rationality second, and third is systematic observation. Faith has a basis in religions. All religious philosophies of world are based on faith. Second is rationality. Rationality is the basis of philosophies. All the philosophical system of world follow rationality, thinking and reflecting on questions of human existence. And third that we all practice today is Systematic observation. Systematic observation is what sciences today follow. When we talk about schools of psychology, we say what is a school? A school is a group of psychologists who have aligned themselves around a particular pattern of ideas promoted by leaders of movement, such as we have in psychology schools like Structuralism, Functionalism, Behaviorism, Gestalt psychology and psychoanalysis. These are propounded by various thinkers, and these systems have their own terminology, their own way of expressing human behavior. One thing that is important that learners should do is, whenever we study some school of psychology or what the thinker has proposed, one should always know what is the basic assumption that a school is following. Second is, what is the method that is adopted by the thinkers, and what are the premises, what are the conclusions that are drawn from the thinking. Schools or systems of psychology no longer exist today, but what exists today is, we know, behavioristic, applied or cognitive perspective. We know that today we have perspectives, not schools. Before we begin our discussion on schools, like functionalism and structuralism, the early schools of psychology, here is the beginning of the beginning. What is the beginning of the beginning? Where these questions first started. First were religious philosophies of world. The starting of knowledge of the world was with the religions of world. We have Hindu religion, we have Buddhism, Islam, Christianity. All were setting the standards of behavior, the meaning of human existence, what should be the code of conduct for our community life. These systems, religious systems, were setting for human beings. Second is second influential system of knowledge is Greek philosophers, mainly Aristotle, Socrates and Plato. These Greek philosophers pondered over many questions, but what was the basic change that has taken place from religious philosophies to Greek philosophy? It was the dependence on rationality. Socrates adhered to reason as the basic method for knowledge, which was absent from religious philosophies. Religious systems were based on faith, based on supernatural ideas. Socrates and Greek philosophers advocated reason as a basic method, basic tool to liberate humans from religious dogmatic beliefs. Third main contribution to the systems of knowledge is Renaissance period. What was the shift that has taken place from Greek philosophy to Renaissance? The main concept for which Greek philosophers were against was supernatural concepts and the dependence on faith. But these Greek philosophers have themselves become a dogmatic belief during Middle Ages. Renaissance, which means rebirth of knowledge. It was the period where science and rationality has taken a main stance. So what was there in the Renaissance period that was important? Renaissance period has changed the world, changed the systems of knowledge. We have great scientists in this period. We know Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, Isaac Newton, who were setting the foundation of system of knowledge that we know sciences, and who were defining the laws for physical world. How is our universe located? What are the principles of physical world? At the same time, people were thinking about the subjective world. Galileo differentiated between physical world and that can be measured and subjective world that cannot be measured. He said physical world was characterized by physical qualities and subjective world was characterized by the qualities which cannot be measured, like temperature, color. These depend on human mind and are beyond measurement. So science was changing the world of knowledge during Renaissance period, and these scientists have great effect on the years to come, on the decades to come. Every social scientist or scientist today, we know, base their knowledge on the work of scientists that was done in 17th and 18th century. Then the main thinker which we know today is René Descartes. We know modern period started with René Descartes' thinking, who said rationality and sciences are the main methods on which our systems of knowledge should be based. A main theory which we know is dualist theory of mind, which Descartes gave. He said mind is immaterial. Mind is not made of material things. Mind and contains certain ideas like knowledge of God, knowledge of space, time and motion. But there were other thinkers who said no, mind is same like other objects. Mind is also made of material, and like Spinoza, who adhered to the concept of materialistic monism, he said mind is mind is like everything else. It is made of matter, and all the things, all the events in the world are determined. Free will is an illusion. So we know gradually we come to distinguish between physical world and subjective world of experience. Physical world, we say, is governed by laws, has independent existence and has primary qualities like quantity, shape, position and motion. And subjective world of experience, we say it is characterized by secondary qualities like color, temperature, smell and sound. It is more unstable and does not behave lawfully. And only the physical world can be studied scientifically. It was the view of the scientists who were championed new system of knowledge in the Renaissance period. So the prominent questions for philosopher in the beginning of 18th century were nature of relationship between mind and body, nature of human mind, nature of consciousness, how the mind acquires the knowledge of external world. These were the basic questions to which philosophers, physicists and psychologists were giving answers. And up to 18th century, there was no separate psychology discipline as such. All the philosophers, all the thinkers were thinking on these questions, and we incorporate it as a knowledge in psychology. First complete picture that we have about mind is in Hobbes' philosophy. Hobbes said that mind is materialistic like all the other things. It is made up of matter, and human behavior and mind are mechanistic. It means they are very much like machines. They behave like other machines behave. We can apply all the laws as we apply on the physical world. Third is deterministic. All actions including human behavior are subject to physical laws. And third is hedonistic. Human behavior is motivated by seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. So we now have the beginning of psychology. Proper psychology that we say is with empiricist philosophers John Locke, Berkeley and Hume. Empiricist thinking was focused on how knowledge is acquired. Is it nature or nurture? Is it environment or heredity? What is important in getting experience, getting knowledge? So empiricist view was it is through environment that we come to know about things, and how we know about things is through sensations. We have ideas in our minds which are copies of sensations, and those ideas are associated together by certain laws. Locke talked about association of ideas, but it was Hume who propounded very clear laws of association. These are cause and effect. Thoughts are related with each other with the relation of cause and effect, contiguity and resemblance. And empiricist has direct implication on associationism. Associationism grew out of empiricism. These philosophers were questioning on if we acquire knowledge through experience, then how these experiences, how our sensations are related to each other. Our mental world is not composed of things as such, sounds, shapes, things, colors. We have experiences of whole. So how these ideas are associated? Associationism grew as a separate system of thought to address our mental world as a complete whole. James Mill was proponent of this system, who said sensation and their copies are basic ingredients of human mind, and they are associated by the principle of contiguity, and strength of ideas depends on vividity and frequency of experiences. What were the later developments? How associationism affected the later development? It was shown in the work on memory by Hermann Ebbinghaus. Hermann Ebbinghaus was impressed by Fechner's work on measurement of sensation, and he believed that we can measure memory in the same way as Fechner has mentioned intensities of sensations. He took himself as a subject and studied memory experimentally for the first time, and it was contrary to Wundt's idea that memory and language, these higher mental processes, cannot be measured experimentally. Wundt believed that these processes can be measured culturally and by other methods, not experimentally. And introspection was the major method that was used before Ebbinghaus to study memory, and Ebbinghaus changed the way memory was researched and experimented. A brief word about psychophysics. What is psychophysics? Actually, psychophysics grew out of the work of physicists like Weber and Fechner, who were first to experiment on human sensations. They quantify how intensities of sensations depend on the changes in intensities of stimulus, how intensity of stimulation affects our sensation. Fechner's classic work, Elements of Psychophysics, addressed this question, that how physical world is related to world of sensation, and he came to know that a lawful relationship existed between physical and subjective world, and it was psychophysics which laid the foundation of experimental psychology in the later years to come. It was very first effort to measure human sensations, and it actually affected Wundt's practical work on reaction time studies. Now we come to psychology as an independent science. How psychology came to be known as an independent science? It was, as we all know, it was through the work of Wilhelm Wundt, and how institutions are important in the development of academics and intellectual life. So institutions such as a lab at a university help to develop and emerge psychology as a separate discipline, and Wundt was in fact impressed by the work of Fechner, but he says psychology is to be separated from physics as it is to be separated from physiology and philosophy. So it was Wundt who took psychology to a separate realm of experimental work. His interests were for immediate conscious experience. What is immediate conscious experience? Like tasting an apple. Wundt would study how it feels to taste an apple rather than imagining about the taste of apple. So he started to find out when a person is given certain experience, how he felt. He used to take verbal reports from subjects on their experiences, and by this work they were purporting to know the components of consciousness. Voluntarism was the system of Wundt, which was known at that time, focused at immediate conscious experience, and the method that Wundt has used was systematic introspection, that is, looking into oneself. And other interest that he has was mental chronometry. Mental chronometry is systematic laboratory method for measuring speed of mental processes, and it was done through reaction time studies, both simple and discrimination. And third that Wundt has contributed to is cultural psychology. And one more structuralist psychologist was Titchener, who was impressed with the work of Wilhelm Wundt, and he introduced structuralism in America under the name of Structuralism, which was earlier known as voluntarism. Structuralism was conceptualized as same as chemistry and physics, and it was purported to study the elements of consciousness. These elements of consciousness were sensation. Sensations have direct reference to the external things. We feel things, we see, we hear. And second component of consciousness is affect or feeling. These are more general experiences than sensations. third component, that is combination of sensation and feeling, arises from the combination of sensations and the memories of previous sensations. And how these combinations are taken place? First is there are some passive combination. They say these are through association. Ideas are associated together passively to form certain simple ideas, and we have complex ideas, and this is through active combination. The process is called apperception or selective attention. But structuralism in itself was criticized for certain things. First, it was criticized for the assumption that structuralism started with to study the component of consciousness. It is elementalist study. Psychologists criticized the idea of compartmentalizing consciousness, which is an impossible thing. And second criticism came in the way for the method employed. It was systematic introspection. Since systematic introspection was used to be taken from trained subjects as verbal reports. These were not to be believed as true reports, and certain psychologists further found our thoughts are not all based on images. We have imageless thoughts also. So how one can imagine every single sensation and give verbal reports of those sensations. And the third thing for which the structuralism was criticized is the method cannot be used on children, cannot be used on ill, and has limitations in itself, laboratory based. All behaviors cannot be studied in the laboratory setting. So we see a major psychological school after structuralism that came was functionalism, and it was William James, an American philosopher and psychologist, who propounded functionalism as a study of the functions of consciousness, not the elements of consciousness. Consciousness, he said, is not an entity, not a thing, but a flux and system of relations. And what was the solution he got for the criticism of structuralist point of view of consciousness? He said, to find the meaning of an idea, we must examine the consequences to which it leads in action. And the purpose of science of psychology should be to study the functions of consciousness, not the structure of consciousness. And method that he employed was introspection, but it was more a kind of reflection, looking into oneself, than systematic introspection advised by structuralist philosophers. Now we come to the contribution of Charles Darwin to psychology. What was Charles Darwin's contribution to psychology as a science? Functionalism, which we see developed at the beginning of 20th century, was directly reflecting Darwin's views on the adaptability and the evolution. How some believe that consciousness evolved because it served some purpose in guiding the individual's activities. But Darwin paved way for two things. First was functional psychology, and second was comparative psychology. Darwin also said there exists a continuity between human and non-human living beings. So we should study, psychology should be focused on the living organisms, whether human or non-human. There is a continuity that exists between all the organisms on the earth. And what were the major influences that functionalists have on psychology as a science? First, adaptive and functional utility of consciousness was addressed for the first time. And second, measurement of individual differences that we see in Galton's work. Galton's work Hereditary Genius says that great men are great because they belong to a family of great persons. He was criticized later, but he propounded a field of study called eugenics, how to promote the evolution or adaptation of good human beings. And third was social Darwinism. Spencer's study about how some people are socially successful and some people not socially successful. So Spencer applied Darwin's views on social Darwinism, to say how he said some people are successful socially because they get the benefit of some limited resources and then get success. So functionalism was the study of mental operations, while structuralism was the study of mental elements. Functionalist view consciousness as an adaptive process to meet the actual demands of life. Functional psychologists are concerned with the entire organism and its relationship to the environment. The influences of functionalism that we see, first it affects generation of philosophers, thinkers and psychologists, and we see the effect of functionalism later after this school is no longer existing. We see various application oriented fields of psychology, like if one idea is to be known for its uses. James has said, if you know the meaning of an idea, you should know the use of that idea. It means if we want to know about sciences and our systems of knowledge, we should put these knowledge system to use. Then people started using theories of psychology to various applications like clinical schools and industrial psychology, forensic psychology. Theories were used to wide range of fields, and theorists were aimed to improve the quality of life based on their findings. Functionalist, who is known more for his educational work than his psychology, he says to learn is to do, and he applied his theories to betterment of education. Before we begin our next discussion on other schools, there is one question. Chomsky's review of Skinner's verbal behavior. There is one question for you. Chomsky's review of Skinner's verbal behavior is regarded by many as the last nail in the coffin of behaviorism. Why? Now we turn to three major schools of 20th century. When functionalism and structuralism, people were dissatisfied with both the schools. There were three major schools that were taking shape in Europe and America. First was behaviorism, second was Gestalt psychology, and third was psychoanalysis. How these systems shaped the generations to come. First is behaviorism. Behaviorism, as many of us know, has changed the terminology of our sciences. It is said to no longer exist in practice, but is it really so? We still use the terminology devised by behaviorists: stimulus and response, reward, reinforcement. It contributed a lot in our understanding of human behavior. John Watson was the founder of behaviorism, and his influential paper in 1913 in Psychological Review, he says psychology is just like a natural science. It should study human behavior. Only observable human behavior should be the subject of science, and its purpose should be the prediction and control of human behavior. He says, mind does not matter. What matters is the study of behavior. And mental realm, which structuralist and functionalist were aimed at, was like a black box to behaviorists. They restricted the use of terms consciousness, thought process, memory, language in their research, and focused only on observable behavior. And the research, Watson also believed the continuity between humans and non-humans. So they said that if experiments are done on animals, these can be applied on humans as it is, because we can know the principles or laws of behavior by studying animals, and we can apply that knowledge to human behavior. Behaviorism as such, as experimentally, it was known to be started with Pavlov's work on digestion. Pavlov, who got Nobel Prize for his work on digestion, he was impressed by, in his speech at function when he was receiving Nobel Prize, he referred that he was studying two reflex arcs, and he was studying psychic stimuli. These psychic stimuli were some which we know conditioned response, conditioned stimulus. There was something other than the actual stimulus that was affecting the behavior of organism, the dog which he has taken. So behavior is defined behavior as a result of conditioning, and environment shapes the behavior by reinforcement specific habits. And what we know behaviorism today is through the effect of Watson's work, Watson's research on behaviorist principles. And it can be seen from very influential saying, very influential quote from Watson, which shows his confidence in the theory which he was adhering to. He said, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well informed in my own specified world to bring them up in, and I will guarantee to take anyone at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant chief, and yes, even beggarman and thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors." So it was the confidence with which behaviorism started to change the world, to change the system of psychology from the study of consciousness to the study of behavior. Yes, we all say today that psychology is a study of behavior, and it was through the efforts of behaviorists. And there was one more concept that came to importance, was learning. As our behavior is dependent on environment, we learn all our behaviors. So learning became an important concept which behaviorists define in three ways. First was SR, which is called SR psychology. That is, our behaviors are results of some stimulus in the environment, and we only give responses to those behaviors. Now this system, this was given by Watson, first SR model, in which organism is no more there, because they say that human mind, consciousness and mental processes, these are not the area that science should deal with. Science is only related with those principles which one can observe. There are stimulus which we can see in the environment, something that causes our behavior, and there are responses, our overt reaction to those stimulus that one can see very clearly. And the purpose of behaviorists should be to predict and control the behavior. But later behaviorists felt that this explanation of behavior and learning is very reductionist, materialist and mechanist. If we exclude all the terms like human cognition, human understanding, memory, perception from the learning situation, how can one explain behavior or learning? So there was a group of neo-behaviorists like Tolman, Hull, who defined learning in a different ways, but they were proud to call themselves behaviorist. They were still adhering the tradition of behaviorism, but they introduced the concepts that they call intervening variables. Between stimulus and response, there is one organism who has minds, organism who has some attitudes, organism who hold memory, knowledge of the system. So they introduce the concept of O, that is SOR. S is stimulus, organism and response. And third system is response, only response, where there is no stimulus. This was given by Skinner, who says this system type R conditioning, and the previous conditioning, that model that Pavlov has given, he called type S conditioning. The other terms that were referred to, that were given to be Skinner's system, were instrumental conditioning and operant condition. Operant is some behavior which operates on the environment, and behavior, he says, depends on the reward of the behavior, how one's behavior pays off. If one's behavior gives good results, then it is repeated. If one's behavior doesn't give good results, it is not tend to be repeated. So he said learning is dependent on the responses of the person on a particular situation, but those responses are dependent on reward, and he included all type of learning in this R system. And he said we can explain whether it is animal learning or human learning, we can explain everything by a single definition of behavior, and that is operant conditioning. And behaviorism, we know, influenced this century in a very big way. And New York Times once wrote that a new epoch in the intellectual history of man was brought by behaviorism. Edward Tolman and Albert Bandura, these were the psychologists of new tradition of cognitive psychologists. Tolman said behavior is purposeful and directed. He said a human being cannot act without a purpose and without a goal. All human behaviors has a goal, and learning take place in latent way. It means hidden. We learn things. It is not always dependent on reward. Suppose someone follows a path every day. He knows that there is a path exists, but we apply our knowledge only when there is a use of that knowledge. We learn so many things every day, but we are not using each and everything which we came to know, and it depends on the use of those behaviors which we have on a particular situation. So he gave other concepts that Tolman gave were cognitive maps and reward expectancy. When organism learn, they developed cognitive maps, and reward expectancy is an important concept in the system of Tolman. Actually, Tolman and other neo-behaviorists were more going towards cognitive explanation of learning, but they were proud to call themselves behaviorist. The other major behaviorist was Albert Bandura, who gave the concept of social learning and observational learning. Thank you.
Important issue while deciding the distribution strategy. There are certain methods, or there are two methods in deciding the distribution of services, that is direct sales, and the other is sales via intermediaries. Direct sales talks about electronic channel. The electronic channel is ATM if you talk about banks, or internet banking if you talk about banks again. We trust electronic channels because they are consistent, they are cheaper, they are convenient, they have got wider coverage and quicker feedback. This is the most widely accepted channel of distribution used by services. The next direct sales channel is franchisees. Franchises means it is granting rights to the other person to exploit a trade name, trademark or product in return for lump sum payment or a royalty. What companies do is they, in smaller areas, organize franchisees, and those franchisees pay in lump sum to the companies for the security amount, and they handle the things themselves at the certain areas. The benefit with the companies is they do not have to put more heads into it, and the things can be handled easily. And one of the things is that the company can have a control on the major things by the franchisees, and if a company feels that the franchisee is diluting the brand value, he can certainly take back the franchise. So that is one of the most important things with the franchisee. The next method we have is quasi-retailing. Quasi-retailing is the retail outlet that sells services rather than goods. For example, hairdressers, travel agents and hotels. These are known as quasi-retailing. The next element we talk about is sales via intermediaries. This is the second strategy for distribution. So the second one is agent. In agents, it is the independent intermediary who may act in the name of or for the principal. And there is a broker. He is an independent intermediary facilitating the sales contract. The broker only facilitates the activity, ads come in a role to play. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'll have to break. We have talked about product, price, place, and the next element is promotion. In promotion, we have got promotion mix. As rightly said by everybody, that communicating the things to the consumer is mostly required, and for that, a promotion mix has to be made by the companies. The promotion mix includes advertising, sales promotion, publicity, and public relations. Advertising. Advertising is that form of promotion mix that is paid and non-personal method. It goes for mass communication. The guidelines for effective advertising program is that the advertising should be clear, it should be simple, it should emphasize mostly on the benefits, and it must promise that should be fulfilled. It should provide tangible clues to the customers and should use testimonials of actual customers or consumers. Second is sales promotion. Sales promotion are offers that are given to the consumers when you feel that the demands are fluctuating. They are the schemes or the offers. The guidelines for better sales promotion is that you have to look for the product scope. Should we actually offer the schemes to the people or not? Should we tell them that with 2 days, 1 day, you don't have to pay anything for? The second thing is the market scope. Does the market require that kind of sales promotion activity or not? Third is the value. And last is the timing. It should be done at the right time. If you start offering sales promotion activities throughout the year, then people feel that you are charging higher and then finally giving you the sales promotion activities. So they should be based on certain period of time or they should be time bound. Next thing is identification of beneficiaries. Identification of beneficiaries is required whenever you have to give the sales promotion offer. If you are giving a smaller thing to a higher end people, they might not like it. So the next important thing is that you should look for who is consuming that service. Next thing is protection against competition. You have to protect yourself from the competitors, and when you have to protect yourself from the competitors, you have to give them the best offer. So these are the elements which should be taken care of while you giving a sales promotion offer. Next promotion mix element is public relation and publicity. Public relation and publicity talk about community relations, event management, corporate identity programs. This helps the companies most of the time in building up a brand, because these are the columns which are there in the newspaper and people feel that they are not bought by the company, and that is the reason people trust them more than the advertisement or the sales promotion offer. And last but not the least, the word of mouth. Service industry is always talking about something which is intangible, and when it is intangible, how should people go and trust it? So for trusting those kind of things, people require word of mouth. They go to their friends, they go to the peers, they go to the colleagues, or even people moving around. They look and hear from them and then finally go and make any kind of decision. We have talked about the 4 P's which are included in marketing mix. Now we move to the extended marketing mix of services. Extended marketing mix of service includes people, or we call it as additional P or 5th P. Service personnel. Whenever we have to talk about people, we have to look for service personnel, their behavior, their attitude, and that is the reason we say training in services are mostly required. Next is customers. Customer help in word of mouth promotions. When we have to talk about people, it is the internal marketing that influences. It leads to service mindedness and customer oriented performance. We can do it with two things. One is the strategic level and the other is the tactical objectives. That is the strategic objective and the tactical objective. Strategic objective talks about management methods, personal policy, planning and control on procedures. And tactical objectives talks about personals are first marketers and perform in certain manners, support service is required. Physical evidence is the next P when we talk about service marketing. Kinds of physical evidence, we have got peripheral evidence and essential evidence. Peripheral evidence talks about possessed as a part of service but by itself is of no value. For example, airline ticket or checkbook. If you have that ticket, it doesn't make any sense for you till the time you go and travel in an airplane. So that kind of evidence is known as peripheral evidence, and essential evidence is the airplane. That becomes a thing which has to be there, without which the service cannot be utilized. Or if you talk about evidence, essential evidence, we have buildings, its sizes, its designs, its decor and logo, which should be taken care of in physical evidence. That helps in building trust in the consumers. According to Baker, it is composite impression of ambience, design, social relationship. When we talk about ambience, whenever you go to a restaurant, what we people look for is the quality, the sense, the sounds, the music. That is what talks about the ambience. If we talk about the design, it is the aesthetics of the architecture. That is the reason people spend so much on probably POP or the walls or the color of the walls, because it is the designs which will again influence the consumers to buy that service. Social relationship. It is the appearance of personal, quality and quantity of consumers. So that means the person who is there, how he is relationship with the consumers. So that will also help you build up the physical evidence. What is the role of physical evidence? Why is it required? It helps in shaping the first impression. The moment you enter into a hotel, this is the physical evidence which people look for. Services come thereafter, because if you don't like the ambience of it, you will certainly not go for utilizing the service. Second is managing trust. If you don't see anything with it, whom should you trust on? If there is not a building, then what will you go for and how will you have a look at it? And then how will you buy the service? So it's help you in managing trust. Facilitating quality of servicing. That means it helps even the provider to provide you that service. He needs a place where he can contact with the consumers and can provide you the service. Then it's changing in the image. That means it also helps you to change your image. If the building is good or if the things are good with you, it will automatically help you differentiate yourself from your competitors. It helps in providing sensory stimuli. That means you can touch, feel something and then can have some more trust on the things you have. Last, it is socializing employees. If people are there together working for a certain element, then it helps in socializing and it helps in making people more responsible towards their duties. Last is the process. This is the 7th P of service marketing mix. This P talks about the system by which you receive delivery. The delivery process can be line operation, job shop operation and intermittent operation. Line operation. If you talk of line operation, you go for a self-service restaurant. That is a line operation. You have to go by the lines or the schemes which the service provider has set for you. So that is one of the way to provide a service. In case you feel that the things are standardized and people can simply go and utilize that service, you can always go for line operations. So the bigger restaurants or the bigger hotels have got this line operation working for them. Next delivery process is the job shop operations. If you see hospitals, they have got job shop operations because they've got different departments. You've got an X-ray department, you've got a pediatrician department, you've got a gynecologist department, you've got so many different things. And according to the requirement of the consumer can always go to the shop he wants to go for. So in that cases, the delivery process should be job shop operations. The next is intermediate operations. Intermittent operation means that they help you building up certain kind of things. That is the combination of things. Then we go for how to deliver this process or how to see what are the issues are important in processes. One is process planning. Next is operation planning, facilitates designs, scheduling, inventory planning, quality and operation controls and forecasting. Process planning talks about how the things have to be made more acceptable by the people. That is the basic guidelines. Operation process planning talks about the elaboration of the processes that you have talked about. So the operations will talk about all the details things or the technical elements that have to be taken care of. Facilities design. Facilities are the things which should be offered to the people, probably the layout which the things have to be taken care of. So that element helps you have the facilities. Then is the scheduling. That is the most important element, and that talks about the time frame. That means that everything has to go by time. You have to fix up a schedule and things should go by the schedule. So that is the next issue that should be fixed in a process. Next is the quality and the operation control. Quality control is most important, and operation control along with that is attached. If you do not provide them quality in their process or in operation, people will not accept that service. And last but not the least is the forecasting. Forecasting means whenever you have decided the things, you have to make sure how the things will go ahead in future.